Before we begin this week's edition of Fork in the Road, we must warn that some content may be extremely upsetting or distressing for some viewers. It contains themes of terrorism, violence, suicide, and other confronting recounts that may be disturbing for some listeners. Viewer discretion is highly advised. Well, welcome to another edition of Fork in the Road, where we talk to the leaders in sports, business and entertainment, their resilience, their journeys and their fork in the road. And this gentleman probably had all that thrust upon him all at once. And in 2002, he had the direction of his life altered with the Bali bombing. He was part of a group of friends of mine that unfortunately caught up in the Bali bombing. But Peter Hughes, I've known for 20 years. He's a very successful businessman, as we can see him running the world from his office there in Perth. He's a very successful businessman, as I said, and he's reasonably fond of a beer because we've had several over the journey. Very warm welcome to my old mate, Peter Hughes. What's happening?
Hey, Corey. No, well, back in Perth, mate, it's all happening here. We're obviously COVID-free. And we're all back at work and everything's quite normal, mate. I can see where we're at the moment and we're busy at work. So that's what's happening in my life at the moment, mate. So it seems to be all work and no play.
How have you been utilising the time? I know you mentioned you're sort of back to some sort of normalcy, but how have you utilised the time?
Oh, look, I think you sort of got to focus on, because I have my own business.
Yeah.
I just threw myself into work, so pretty much 12 hours a day, just sort of making changes, subtle changes to the business, which made me sort of work on areas where I didn't have time to do before, which meant, I bought an office, I renovated it. It just took weeks to do, so that sort of kept my workers where they had to be and sort of kept everyone together and like we're talking about 4 or 5 months later and it's sort of ongoing. So I've made myself more busy.
Yeah.
So when people were shutting down, I was doing the opposite. I was actually, doing more in terms of trying to create more business out of a pandemic. So it actually worked because at the end it sort of kept us afloat all the way through. So I took a negative from the pandemic and I threw a positive spin on it, which cost me a lot of money, but indirectly it kept everyone on myself busy. So,
do you reckon your mindset, without jumping too far forward about what we're going to talk about, but do you reckon your mindset, have you always had that mindset where you're focused on more on what you can do and not what you can't? Like, have you always had that, or did that come about of also what you'd also been through?
Oh no, I think I've always had it. I think I can reflect back as a kid, growing up in a big family, like the youngest of 8 kids and always sort of the last to get anything and always had to try harder to get something. So, and I think that was sort of brought upon back early in my life, moving forward and, Bali bombings was a pretty good example of that. I didn't want to die. So I had to sort of keep myself busy in my head to sort of say, well, let's try and work through this situation and try and get the positive out of something such a horrific situation. And I think it's the whole thing, even, like pandemic and, oh, well, what's that? Well, that just stops you doing things. So I just sort of I said, well, if that's where we're going to be right now and that's the worst it can be, what can I do to make it better for me? Yeah. And that was to not sort of lay down and just do nothing and just wait for something to happen. I said, bugger it, I'm going to do this. I'm just going to make it better for me to keep busy because I'm not good at doing nothing. I'm good at doing something. So yeah, I think it's always been there with me, but I'm a bit of a risk taker, Corey. I always have been, mate. I'm at the other end of this spectrum, I reckon. Whereas if there's something to have a go at, well, I'd be the first one to say, oh yeah, I'll go and do that, that type of thing. So I wouldn't wait. I would just say, oh, I'll get over and done with now type of thing. So yeah, that's where I'm at with it.
And look, just a bit of background for everyone. How many times over the journey had you been to Bali, and what are some of your favourite things about, well, still to this day, but even before the Bali bombing, like what are the favourite things that you do love about Bali and all the times that you've been there?
I think, so I went to Bali at a pretty late age. I was, I think looking back, I was about 30, 30, 31, which is quite late to go to Bali.
Very late.
You guys went quite early in your life, in your age. And I think the thing I liked about Bali is the fact that it was 3 hours from Perth. Very easy to, I could have gone down south many times, but I always wanted, I think in Bali is something international, even though it was just 3 hours away.
Yeah.
But the thing that really struck me most about Bali is the fact that you can just switch off and you feel like you're in someone else's country, and just to sit at the beach and have a bintang sort of just quickly brought to you and thinking, oh wow, how good's that? And just to have that quiet beer. And I think my favourite thing, Corey, I think that's how we all met when I met all these guys, is the fact that my favourite thing was to sit around a pool bar.
Yeah.
And just to be in the pool and then have a beer and swim out and come back and have the beer and relax and stuff like that. That was my favourite thing. And I think that that was always drawn to me, and also obviously about the people and how relaxed it was. And you could be anybody you wanted to be in Bali. You didn't have to be this. The amount of people I met that was sort of probably anybody's. It was just everyone. I think Bali just brought everyone back to a level.
Yeah.
So this is normal. When I go back to Australia, I can be this politician or this high flyer. I could be just this garbo. They're the same people. So I think that's the thing about Bali. You could be anybody you want to be, but it just brings you back to earth in terms of you can really relax. You can have a good time. You can do what you want in Bali, basically.
And it was all those years ago. You might have a better memory than me, but how was it a case of you met? It was Jason and I. Was that through Gary Armstrong, who ended up, his son Stephen Armstrong, that obviously played for the West Coast Eagles, became a premiership player. But that was our mutual friends how we were connected, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think I actually met Duck. I think I met Duck the year before, and then you guys sort of came along through Gary, and it was mutual acquaintances, obviously, because Gary was tied up in footy through his father, and obviously the Perth Footy Club back in Perth.
Yeah.
And they had that synergy with the North Melbourne Footy Club, which I didn't know about till obviously when Gary met you guys, and that's how it all connected. So yeah, somebody knew somebody, and I think the thing about football, it didn't matter whether you played it in Perth at what level, and if you followed it at the highest level, which you guys were, it was that connection and synergy that sort of brought people together. So that's how it really started.
Yeah. And that lead up to the trip to Bali in 2002. Now, I was at Carlton and I had only just been to Bali, I think a few weeks before. I know Jason Mick had flown from Sydney on the Friday night. I know that I was with them on the Friday night in Sydney, but then they'd all, as you guys would, you'd all organise to meet in Bali. So what was it for? I think it was just more of an end of season trip, wasn't it? That you were meeting Jason and Mick over there?
Yeah, I think it was, to be honest, Jason hounded me. I didn't want to go. and the thing about it, well, you've got to go because I'm getting married. This could be my last swan song type thing. And in the end, it was like, all right, so where are you? Where are you, Jace? He said, well, I'm overseas. And I said, Mick's coming. I said, where's he? Well, he's in another country. And I said, well, okay, so all right, so we'll meet there. When are you going there? So it all happened within days. And every time I used to travel, it was always within a week, and saying, oh, I'll see you in a week type thing. And that was pretty much how it worked out. So we all went to Bali on a whim because it was like, okay, we'll just go there for a week and we'll come back and we'll do our jobs, whatever we need to do. But in that, I took a mate of mine at the same time, and Gary. And I said to Gary, you want to come along? He said, oh, who's going? I told him, he said, oh, yeah, I'd like to meet Mick. That'd be really good. And I can remember saying to Jace, I said, I'm bringing a mate of mine, Gary. He's a bit of a drinker. He can drink a bit. Anyway, so that's sort of how it sort of panned out. So we actually all got to Bali on different planes, different days, different times, all that sort of stuff. So it was on a whim type situation, but yeah, that's what you do when you know mates that have got different time situations going on in their life.
And then knowing all of you and knowing a daily routine in Bali, what can you remember back to that night? You know, I mean, as I said, you know, I mean, I know how a usual afternoon would go with you boys in Bali. You might have been in the pool bar all day, and then you probably would have organised to have some dinner and then hit the town. Was that more or less the way that everything unfolded?
Exactly. Well, that was our habit. We had a bad habit of waking up probably early in the morning and having breakfast after a late night, and then heading down to the pool bar about 1 or 2 o'clock. We're always careful about that because we didn't want to get there too early, because we had to make sure that we can get there, we could last the whole night, whether it was going to be at Paddy's or Surrey Club or something like that. So that's exactly how it panned out. We all met around the pool bar about lunchtime, and I introduced the boys to my mate Gary, and Gary had already had about 10 beers by 1 o'clock, and the boys were a bit worried. And that's what happened. We hung around the pool bar to about 5 or 6, and then we all headed into, I forget that, the macaronis, I think it was called.
Yeah.
And we all got in there, and it sort of worked out from there. So what we were going to do after that. So exactly how we used to do things every day. It didn't matter, you know, and it was just this good routine we all had, I guess. Yeah, and the thing about it too, well, we always knew if we were going to go into the Surrey Club, we always knew that other people were going to be there that we would know. You know what I mean? It was just that comfort zone of saying, well, I know that if we go there, we're going to know people. And we did all the time.
And then I think fast forward onto the actual incident itself. Like, where were you guys? Obviously, you're at Paddy's at the time, and I mean, there was a group of people. There was obviously yourself and Jace and Mick and Leanne, Gary, as you mentioned. What was your immediate reaction when you hear a noise like you did?
Well, firstly, it was more like, because I was at the bar, and when I heard the noise, it was like to me, it was like an explosion of some sort, or it was like a bottle bursting behind the bar, you know, I mean, exploding, like someone dropped a bottle or something like that. At first, that was like the first instant of probably a few seconds, I guess. And then, but the other thing was the impact of being hit by somebody. That was the thing that sort of got me a bit, because at that stage, it was only just some explosion. It was in front of me. It had to be in front of the bar, and someone's hitting me on the side. So a little bit of confusion type thing, but it was more like everything seemed quite normal for a few seconds. And then the reality of it all, once it sort of started to pan out a bit, many seconds after that, and then it sort of became real. But the situation to me was, my focus was so on myself, getting the drinks for the fellas, and turning around and not seeing anyone, which is very, very weird, you know, type situation. So that was something that, from an instant, was about my mindset, thinking to myself. When I think back 20 years now, I sometimes have a little different version of it, only because it's clear in my head, but sometimes I want to go to explain it. It triggers other things in my brain, but the reality of it all was I was at the bar and somebody cannoned into me. The place went black, you know what I mean? Dusty black situation. Yeah. And obviously not seeing Mick and Gary and Jace and the girls, because it was just too black. It was like someone had switched the light off. And then you know, I've got somebody next to me, and I've got my instinct was just to get out of the place. Don't know why, but it was just like, oh,
Yeah.
we need to get out, and hopefully when I get out, I'll see the boys. But that didn't happen.
And then like your initial thoughts when you've actually got to get out of there, what's the scene like outside that you then greeted by? Is it just pretty much sort of mayhem, you know what I mean, in terms of what's going on outside?
No, it was weird because I had this girl with me, and we made ourselves out to the front of the to Paddy's. You know, Paddy's was quite interesting because it was a thatched roof type style. Everything was timber and glass type thing.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
And when when you walk into a nightclub or a bar, basically the entrance is the exit. You know what I mean? And so I'm walking out with this chick. I've got no idea who she is, but she was pretty cut up. And I was sort of okay. When I quickly think about it, I was reasonably okay. I didn't have much problems with me at all. And then when I got out to the front, everything was normal. It's like nothing had happened. And so the street was just, the cars were going up and down. I had a quick look at the Surrey Club. Yeah, there was still a line at the Surrey Club type thing.
Yeah.
And here I am with a girl and I'm looking back at the nightclub, and all the lights are off, and there's smoke everywhere, and outside it's like nothing's happened at all. Weird. So I'm looking back in thinking, well, only for an instant, because my main focus was on this young lady and hoping she was okay. And then, within seconds, the car bomb, or the explosion out of the Surrey Club, which was only down the road,
yeah,
that happened 40 seconds later. And that sort of, knowing what I know now, if I had got outside, I would just run, and it just hightailed it out of the place. But because I had this girl with me, I wasn't thinking like that. I was thinking like, well, where's Jace? Where's Mick? Where's Gary? Where's girls? And then the explosion happens, not knowing what that was, and then it was on for young and old. So I was sort of in, but I was in no man's land. I was in a fight for life, for survival, and then it became very real. I mean, extremely real. It was, I'd obviously been knocked out for a little while, probably. I reckon 10 or 15 seconds, 20 seconds, which felt like a lifetime. And then when you sort of come back into the Paddy's nightclub, realising that it's really on fire, there's people laying everywhere. And then you're just trying to get up, and I couldn't even stand up because a part of my leg had been shattered.
Yeah.
And I obviously had a lot of cuts in my body that I had no idea about. And not that I wanted to know either. I didn't want to know what I was like, because I guess I would have just laid down and died and think that was it. But adrenaline is a funny thing, Corey, and it kicked in very, very quickly. And that was what kept me alive.
If you're enjoying this episode of Fork in the Road, thanks to National Make Good Solutions, please like and subscribe below. We always used to probably joke about it when we've been in those places, and between me and Jason, my brother, and everyone, we've all fallen over after a couple of drinks and either cut our arm, and often joke about the fact that, if we ever broke our arm or something like that, we'd jump on a plane and go home.
Yeah.
Was that are you then thinking at this stage, going, holy hell, I'm in actual Bali of all places, that I know that with the greatest respect to them, their medical system's not the best.
Mm.
Were you starting to then think that I've got to get myself to a hospital, or?
I think initially it was when it became quite clear that I was in a bit of a mess.
Yeah.
And I had to get out of Paddy's for the second time, and knowing I couldn't really walk properly, and I was really dragging myself out of the place.
Mm.
And then realising there was a lot of other people we were trying to help too. I didn't realise I was helping other people, and it became a bit of a mess. But I didn't think like that to start with, Corey. It was only when I started making my way down to the Bounty Hotel, which is just up Poppy's Lane there. and we'd been there a few times before, having a few drinks. And that was my first train of thought. And when I actually got to the Bounty Hotel, I remember just sitting on the foyer there, which was normally white tiles, and it was just full of people laying down with, cutting. It was a war zone. And I can remember sitting down and hand on my chin and on my knee and thinking, well, you cut yourself in Bali, you normally go home. You know what I mean? And straight away I thought, well, I'm going to die here. That's it. There's no hope at all. Because the scene I was seeing, because I could see them and I couldn't see me, was every time someone saw me that walked past, they just, said, mate, you okay, type thing. I'm thinking, shit, how am I going? And in reality, I just knew I'm going to die here in Bali. And it was exactly what you said earlier. We all got smart. We all knew that Bali's has all those infections, and if you cut yourself, and we've known people to lose feet and arms and limbs, and walking along the beach and walking on needles or glass, stuff like that. So yeah, history back then, what I knew about Bali, because I'd been there many times before, was to go home. But the chances of me going home at that point, Corey, were pretty slim, very slim.
And then I suppose that timeline from there to then you ended up in Adelaide Hospital. Do you have any recollection of, your journey from that journey to Bali back to Adelaide Hospital?
Yeah, I was a prick, in terms of being a good patient. I was when I actually got to Denpasar Hospital, and I can remember sitting out front and someone walking up to me and saying, "Man, you need some help. We need to incubate you and all that sort of stuff." I said, "No, it's all right. Help other people." The only reason I didn't, I was scared. I was scared about if I fell asleep, I wouldn't get up.
Yeah.
And I wanted to remember everything at the death knell, in terms of, if you're really going to put me under at some stage, I want to tell you, I want you to do that. At the moment, I'm telling you not to do it. So in effect, what I was doing, I was killing myself without knowing it. So I was a bit of a dickhead when that was happening. But in reality, it probably was good for me, because I could remember everything. I could remember everything I could see. I was in control of what I could see. The only time I wasn't in control is when I actually got to the Denpasar airport. And it was a good feeling in some sense, because we had the Australian Air Force that turned up medically, and we're about to get medevaced out. And it was only a time when a young, defence personnel doctor had sort of said, "Mate, we're going to have to cut your arms and legs and have to, let the fluid out of your system and stuff like that." I said, "Oh, that's all right." But I didn't realise when he'd done that, I couldn't move my arms or my legs, and the only thing I could move was my head. And I got to tell you, of course, I just realised I wish I'd told him no, you know what I mean? Because the risk was I could lose my arms or legs, but he was doing every second person after I realised what he'd done. So if I had said no, that I could have been all right, I reckon. But then again, maybe I couldn't have been either. So when I actually got to Darwin, I could remember everything, thinking all these stupid things in my head. And then when I got to Darwin and they told me I had to go to Adelaide, I pretty much said, "Well, you're kidding me, aren't you? I'm from Perth." And then one of the doctors has got a bit of humour. He says, "Well, they don't die in Adelaide." I said, "Well, mate, send me to Adelaide if they don't die in Adelaide." That type of stuff, And then 2 weeks later, I wake up in Adelaide. And then it became very real, because I'd gone through all the trauma of the operations, all the pretty much nightmares when I was in a coma, I guess, and those sort of things. So when I woke up in Adelaide, I don't know if I was happy about it, but I was happy to be alive.
Yeah.
It was just a surreal situation to be in, to know you had no control over it, and that was the thing that really got me a lot.
And you would have had obviously no idea how you looked, like, as in there was that famous footage on 60 Minutes, which it's a reality check for anyone when you see your close friends on 60 Minutes. I don't know whether we've ever spoken about this. When I watch 60 Minutes, and when the first 4 stories on there are all about your friends, it's not your usual Sunday night viewing when you sit down to watch 60 Minutes, that you had Jace, the girls, and then that footage of you. Did you get a shock, like down the track, when you'd actually eventually seen that footage of how big your head was?
Oh, man, I think you're the only person that's ever asked me that question, Corey. I've been interviewed over the last 20 years. No one's ever asked me that question.
I'm in front of Peter Overton in 60 Minutes, Buddha. I'm on the...
No, I'm telling you, it was really weird because when I first saw it, and this is where your family comes into you a lot more than you know, is that Lee kept me away from a lot of stuff. And indirectly, I didn't see myself for 6 weeks, like to see myself.
Yeah.
And then one day, they kept all the newspapers away from me. I'd heard all these stories. And anyway, before 60 Minutes, they wanted to come back and interview us. Anyway, I said to Lee, you can let me have a look at a couple of papers, will you, or what? And he goes, yeah, do you really want to see it now? I said, yeah, and I've heard these stories about me. And I started to come back to a bit of me, And I must admit, when he brought the papers out and he showed me, I went, no, you're joking me, mate. That cannot be me. Anyway, I knew I was in trouble, Corey, when I couldn't understand what I looked like. If someone had shown me something like that in Bali, I would have gone, yeah, come and get me. But that was the reality of it all. So when you see your head as wide as your shoulders, and that's how wide my head was, and that's just bizarre. How do people live through that, or get through that? So it was crazy.
And Pete, speaking of things whilst you and Jace, and as Jace would say, you had a little bit of a sleep. I think in both your cases, you're in a coma for a number of weeks. Did you have any idea, and how proud did it make you feel of Lee basically being at your side 24/7 for the entirety of that time? Because at the time, I'm in Melbourne and I'm sort of bedside with Jace during that entire time, and then I'm putting phone calls into Adelaide talking to Lee. But to wake up and know to see him there, how proud were you of him? I know you're immensely proud of Lee anyway, but to have him there when you wake up after that experience, what was it like?
Oh, look, I think, shock. You're in shock. I remember when I woke up and I saw Lee, I actually thought I saw myself. I thought someone was pulling my leg because, your kids grow to a certain age. They might be 16 to 25 and they look like you. And I thought it was me. So when I sort of looking at Lee thinking, is that him or was that me? I had no idea. And it took me a few days to grasp it. So I didn't get the pleasure of actually going through that moment with Lee, saying, how good is it to see him, all that sort of stuff. The problem I had was I woke up in pain, and I didn't know I had I had no pain until I woke up. And so for the first week and a half or even 10 days, I hated Lee because he couldn't stop the pain. And I said, mate, you need to stop the pain. Otherwise, take off, in subtle words. And that was probably broke it all to me with him a bit because he didn't want to see me like that. Yeah. And that traumatised him and it traumatised me. And it became a slinging match between us as a father and son. And only a father and son can do that to each other. And so in effect, and what friends were telling me, when Lee turned up and saw me and said to the doctors, no, that's not my dad, And when I was in hospital and I had my friends come to Adelaide and, they took over someone's house and we had all the people living there and every day with me in Adelaide was, well, how's Pete going today? And the doctor would say, we don't think he's going to make it. So they just go straight to the pub and get pissed. So the next day the doctor ring him up, no, he's come good. So that night again, they just go back to the pub and get pissed. So they did that for 10 days. Every second day I was good or bad. So in effect, by the time I actually come good, Corey, and have a conversation with Lee, it was very emotional because once I started to realise I was starting to come good, then me and him as together could relax a bit better. You know what I mean? So hard times. It was, I always say to people, like, even though I was injured, and badly injured, Lee was badly injured too. So he was on the same ride, but in a different mindset. So it was like no control or have control. There was none. So it was just hope. We were just hope and hoping. And in the end, it sort of worked out.
And then what about, there's that part of it with Lee, but then how were your feelings then towards the people who'd basically done all this? Like, what were your initial thoughts once you'd understood what they'd done? What were your feelings like towards the people that had done it?
It was really weird. It never actually crossed my mind. I was wholly and solely focused on myself. I didn't want to, because it was such a, it's the biggest thing that's ever happened to Australia, outside of Australia, in terms of wartime, and this is peacetime.
Yeah. And
I didn't want to have an opinion. I just kept it to myself in terms, you know what, I'm not going to spend a second on it because I've got a lot of work to do to get well. I've got a lot of work to do mentally and physically to get back to where I had to be. So I never even thought about it. So even when it got brought up, I just didn't have an opinion because I saw the fact that because we'd lost 200 odd people, 88 Australians, I felt that would have been a little bit disrespectful in terms of their families because I was a lucky one. Yeah. And I had to live through the guilt of being a survivor, knowing I'd been standing next to someone else's son or daughter that didn't make it. So I just put a zip on it. I just said, no, I'm going to focus on myself. And if I could switch something back to the families of the children that didn't come home, I'd rather focus on that a bit more than what I needed to do about the criminal act at the time. Because, you know what, when I started meeting these people that lost their loved ones, they hugged me as if they were hugging them. And I felt that was better for them to have that as a presence than me blurting out stuff about, this is wrong. And I don't even know why I was thinking all that. I don't know whether it's just in my nature or not, but I just found that humanity worked in a different void for me because I didn't want to criticise, the act. It was terrible. But anyway, that's how I deal with it.
And then you obviously had a long recovery ahead. Speak of Fiona Wood and how she gave you a fair bit of tough love, did she, about kicking your stubborn little butt?
Oh, I think so. I was with John Greenwood, obviously, in Adelaide, and I had a great time. I was just sitting there and getting looked after like a baby, and just easy. I cracked the sads one day in Adelaide, and I said to John, I want to go home. And then he said, well, you can, but we don't want you to go. So when I heard about Fiona Wood, I thought, wow, how good's this lady? She's done everything. And just like the guys over in Adelaide, they were incredible people. Yeah, when I first got to meet Fiona, she said to me one morning, and I only just met her, she walked in 7 o'clock in the morning and said, 8 o'clock, you're going to be up walking. And I just said to Fiona a few choice words, normally a couple of swear words, Corey. I understand it more. And he said, no chance, Fiona. Anyway, she tried to get me up walking and I couldn't swear enough about her. But, tough love. I got up and started walking and it was hard work and I had to do all the physio. But if it wasn't for something like that, because you can die in hospital if you want. You can lay there and do nothing if you want. The idea is to get out of there. And the only way you're going to get out of there is get mobile. So I had to go back to the basics. I had no sense of smell. My hearing was buggered, all that sort of stuff. So I had to retrain myself, and that's how it worked. So, I always look back at it as a good learning curve for other people. And I tell people very often, if I see them in hospital, you need to work on it. And I think that's where it's got to be. And we all know what Fiona's about, and how most doctors are, especially at that time, because they they were all trained for it. They didn't know it was going to. They actually all didn't know it was going to happen then, but they all trained for it. So we were lucky.
From what you're saying, what's the hardest part? Is it the physical challenge or the mental challenge?
The physical challenge was hard work, but I just, I played footy at a reasonable level, Corey, and I think that it was like doing a long pre-season, but it kept going on and on and on until it got right. But that worked. But mentally, it was really, really hard. It was challenging because your body's full of drugs most of the time, and mentally you're just trying to cope with it. And I really battled with that because I became very insecure. I was outside. I didn't want to go home anymore. I found hospital my home because I was that used to it. Yep. And so you had to retrain everything in terms of your mindset with where you're at and what do I do next. And so I was always thinking I've got to go back to work, and they're telling me I can't do that. You're not going to do that for 2 years. And I did that. I just challenged everything. So, and that was the hardest part, the mental side of things, because, I remember a story about, they offer psychological help, and in the end, when I met this young girl that was in training, I don't think she ever did it again after she spoke to me, because the trauma that comes out of your head and you throw it back out to somebody is not nice. You know what I mean? So, challenging.
This episode is brought to you by National Make Good Solutions, experts in taking your commercial property back to the day it was built at the end of your lease. He's both great mates of ours, but when you saw Jace doing what he was doing to make it back on the footy field, how great was it for you that, number one, he was standing next to you, so it offered a lot of hope and inspiration. So there's that side of it, but then also, he's one of our great mates. What was that like for you to watch him eventually get back on the field?
Oh, it was pretty hard. It was. I kept saying to Jace, "What are you doing, mate?" I can see what he's wearing. We're going through the same recovery, but he was a lot younger than me. And he's going to play AFL footy. I said, "You fucking mad, mate? You're absolutely crazy. What the hell are you doing? You're thinking, good on you for doing it. Good on you, mate." All that sort of stuff. But he played those games out at Port Melbourne and stuff like that. And when he'd take those bandages off, it was just like someone kicked the crap out of him. I said, "Mate, are you serious?" That type of thing. So push forward, and he played that one game, and it was quite interesting because I think it was only me and Narissa knew that he was going to retire. That was his only game, and that was the most probably highlight for me. It was the fact that I knew he was going to pull it, and he proved the point to himself, and he had to do it. He had to do it to himself, because not only made me feel good, it made everyone, the 88 Australians' families feel good. It made all the people that survived feel good. It made all the families realise, you can prove something to yourself, but you can also prove something to others to say, you know what, they didn't get me, and all that sort of stuff. And that was the highlight for me, because good on him for busting himself up and looking like crap. And because you don't heal, it takes weeks to heal from bad burns, and he got through it. It was very humbling. It was a very good moment, very special moment.
Yeah, it's amazing when you think about it that unfortunately he didn't get to play in a premiership because he had a bit of an indiscretion, but you were not to know that he was going to do something that was way, way, way bigger than a premiership could ever deliver, like to inspire hope. And after what had happened with Bali, to be able to come back and do what he did is much, much bigger than football.
Oh yeah, no, he knew that. And you're one of his best mates, and we all are. We all know the guy, basically. And at the end of the day, he couldn't have done it any other way himself. And I think that it was a credit to him. He's one out of the box, Jace. He could be two different people, Jace, as we know. And you know what I mean. So, but that was his moment. I just think that you know, you talk about grand finals and that, you know, of course, you know, that's your footy. You know, that's the game you play and you aspire to do it. Well, that was his grand final, you know, and good on him. You know what I mean? Because it made a lot of people feel good, and that's what it had to be about.
Yeah. And then what was it like for you, like that first time that you actually made a flight back over to Bali? Like, was it more of your case that it was a bit of like an act of defiance that you wanted to go back to a place that you dearly loved?
Yeah. Also, it was like obviously getting off the horse and, you know, getting smashed and not accepting the fact that they're going to keep me away type thing. But it was also a fact of there was a few people over there I had to thank that were expats that lived there, and Chrissy and Johnny Lincoln and a few of the boys from the beach and stuff like that, that we all got to know back then. And we know that they did incredible things to just to support, you know, for all people that got badly injured. So, yeah, I had to get back there and sit on that beach and just sit on the plastic chair and just reflect back, looking over Kuta Beach and having that cold bowl of bentang. But, you know, and the other side was it was a few days of being there, and I just wanted to come home too, you know, because I realised, yeah, I've got a taste of it now. I need to be back home. But it was, I think you have to do that. I think Bali, I had to do that for them anyway, at least, because they saw me as a bit of a, you know, they lost a lot of people holidaying and stuff like that, and you know, and their economy was down, and people like me that were coming back were encouraging other people from Australia to do the same. And I think that's what we all tried to do.
Yeah, and I know that everyone can see that you've got an incredible attitude towards it all, but when you went into the trial, there was some famous footage. Did you basically, when you went into that trial, you made sure that you had to go in there and look him right in the eye?
Yeah, I think so. I think Ambrosio was an interesting fella, but you know, the interesting thing was walking out there, Corey, and you know, I'd lead front row seats basically, and it only hit me when I sat down and I saw Lee and I had Ambrosio there, and the first thing I wanted to do was obviously run over him, give him the best shirt front or elbow you give anybody. And then in a sense, I don't know if it was the right thing either, because it was quite challenging, because Lee was probably more angry than me, and it should have been Lee sitting in that seat. Should have been Lee confronting this fella. And I think, you know, looking back at that, it was a good thing. But for Lee, for my son, it was hard. It was extremely hard, because pretty hard when you've got somebody that's attacked somebody, and you're sitting there and you got the prosecutors and the judge and stuff, and you've got your son behind you, and I started to think to myself, well, I'm sure if these guys didn't have these M16 guns and whatever, I'm sure Lee would have gone over there, and I was more concerned for him, because I started to realise, well, they've attacked his dad.
Yeah.
Someone attacked my dad. You know, they cop it basically. So it sort of struck me a bit, because Lee really lost the plot for about 4 or 5 hours after that, and you know, I didn't know. It wasn't a good thing afterwards. It was a horrible thing, but reflecting back now, anyway, at least.
Yeah. And look, after that, life obviously changed a fair bit. Was the one good side effect of it all that you're able to go and speak to a lot of people? I mean, in terms of your talks and things like that, was that one upside of being able to tell like a positive message out of something horrific that happened?
Yeah, I think public speaking, Corey, you've done it. I think the best thing about it is that people do want to know, and they still want to know. But the reason I sometimes do it, when I used to do it more often than not, was to clear my head. It used to get muddled up a bit, because, but then I know every time I used to go and talk about it, I'd feel good for a couple of weeks. It's like this, your brain's getting a recheck. The chemical that's going through your head's not as bad anymore. you've got more positive thoughts out of it. So it's a very cathartic experience. Yeah, I've cut it right back now, but if people still want to do it, I don't mind doing it. But it's a good clean out, put it that way. So.
And look, you touched on that on the top, like some of the coping mechanisms and strategies, like getting through your experience. There'd be a lot of people out there now, and you probably already covered this, but I reckon it's worth going over again, about how you can get through an experience, like a bad experience. And there are a lot of people out there at the moment that might be struggling, but you did have some great advice, I know, off the top about what you've done in your own business.
Yeah, look, challenging times. Oh my God. You know, like if you don't know the experience, and if you haven't lived something like that, and everything's been normal in your life, and all of a sudden you get it taken away from you, it impacts horribly on someone's mindset. So my advice has been to everybody was to find something you like to do, and if it's a part of what you do, don't do something. Just keep yourself busy. It could even be fitness. It could be something. You know what I mean? You know, as we know, a lot of people have turned to alcohol and stuff like that. But I don't mind a beer, I must admit. I've had a few more than I should have in the last 6 months. So, yeah, there's a positive. That's my little dog.
I wonder what that was.
Yeah, it's Jake. That's Jake. It's actually not a little dog. He's a little pug, but he's a little bit bigger than a pug, really, to be honest. But yeah, I think people going through this pandemic situation just got to find something that's going to keep them busy and active. And you know, there's a lot to do, but normally it's like a clean up or a clean out. So you know, and that's what I did. I just decided to throw myself in the business on a positive note than a negative note, and so that sort of got us through big time. Got me through anyway.
Yeah. Now, the other one that's I think has been fantastic that's come out of this situation is you've set up a Burns Foundation, I believe, that you've set up. And can you explain to everyone there a little bit more about what you're doing with that?
Well, the foundation's moved on now, but when I started at the time, all it was about trying to give something back. And what I could actually give back to the people that saved my life. I wasn't quite sure what to do about it, but in effect, we had it for about 12 years, and indirectly, it just helped people that are normal people that were going through a situation that's created burns from an accident of some description. So out of the Bali bombings, most people that got bad burns got treated very, very well, and probably treated better than the normal. And I guess that coming out now, not to say they don't get treated like the normal, but we can fast track people quickly in terms of advice and where they should go. Where before they wouldn't have had that. So it was more the awareness, and putting them at ease in terms of when someone gets really badly burnt, and the advice you can give them without a doctor or a nurse giving them advice, because it's always it's probably a bit more brutally honest from our end than it would be from a doctor or a nurse. And at least we could actually fast track them as to where they're going to be in terms of their recovery, and not to plan ahead too much at top.
Well, Hughesy, we get to one of my favourite segments when we get to ask everyone the photo that means the world to them. I do have an inkling what the photo may be, but tell everyone out there your favourite photo that means the world to you.
Look, it was probably a few years after the actual Bali bombings that, you know, I'm actually sitting at a bar with my son Lee, and that's what we mainly used to do when we had photos in Bali, but this is where we live in Burswood, and I guess that, you know, we're both happy people. You can see I look a little bit different in terms of what I used to look like, but Lee, as a young man growing up in his 30s, it sort of highlights to me that as I'm getting older, I can just see him developing. So that photo, you know, we don't have too many photos together, I must admit, but that one sort of tells me that a lot of love and a lot of strength combined. So I appreciate that, what Lee did back then, but also for the whole of my life, to be honest, ever since I had Lee. So yeah, there's a lot of meaning there.
Yeah. And to our final question, and I may have an inkling what this may or may not be, but everyone has their fork in the road moment, which is what this is all called, Hughesy. And there might be some guesses as to what your fork in the road may or may not be. I may be guessing out of nowhere what it might be, but what's the fork in the road moment where life could have gone either way for good, or mainly for the good, that things could have gone?
I think you probably know, Corey. It's Lee. I know. I remember. I'll never ever forget this. I was sorry. Might have to do that again. I'll never forget this. When the initial bomb went off, the suicide bomb went off in Bali, in Paddy's, I knew I was in trouble. I knew I was in a bad situation. And the first thing I thought, well, what's Lee going to think about this? And that was the whole purpose of the whole thing with Lee, that I never stopped thinking for a second about Lee. And that just kept me going. So, yeah, it's Lee.
Very good. Now, it sounds like you're very much a man in demand. You've got a few people calling you, Hughes. Like, you're actually trying to pretend to all of us that you're actually busy.
Yeah, I know. It's someone else should be answering the phone. Yeah, we are busy. But that's part of life, Corey, you know that.
Exactly right. No, but look, on behalf of everyone, it's been great to sit down with you, old mate. And look, I was in a very, very rare situation that when you have multiple people go through what they did in Bali, but to be able to watch the pair of you not only get through it and fight your way through it, and more importantly, come out the other side and be successful and amazing people like you are. I'm in a very, very fortunate situation. I've got two great mates, and it's actually been great to sit down with you. Even better once we're eyeballing one another. And by the way, I was going to make a joke before that would have been one of the first times you would have gone to the bar to get a drink. So I don't know what you were doing there. There's the moral of the story. Don't go get a drink from the bar. That's
it, mate. I agree, Corey. I understand. But you know what I'm like. I'm always getting the first. Always getting in there first, mate.
Knew it wasn't going to be Mick. Mick can never go to the bar.
No, he never did. No, it's exactly right. If he ever gets to see this, he'll ring me.
But this will somehow get back to him, Hughes. You know that. But look,
I know Mick.
But look, on behalf of everyone, thanks for taking the time out. And for those out there, I hope you enjoyed another episode of Fork in the Road. And make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we will see you next time.